Straight ahead on Law&Crime Daily. New York real estate developer Douglas Durst takes the stand against his own brother.
He'd like to murder me.
Shocking testimony in the trial of Robert Durst as the defendant takes a subtle jab at the prosecution. And the life of 13-year-old Dylan Redwine.
Dylan was a happy-going kid.
The boy's stepfather describes searching for the teen as Dylan's own father stands trial for Dylan's murder. Plus, the brave police officers who jumped into rising floodwaters in Michigan to save an 82-year-old woman trapped inside her vehicle. And the so-called widower is back in court. 4 of his 6 wives now dead. What Thomas Randolph has to say as he awaits a new trial.
This is nonsense. I want the hell out of here.
Law&Crime Daily covering court cases from coast to coast. Welcome everyone to Law&Crime Daily. I'm Brian Buckmeyer along with Terry Austin. We begin with testimony from Robert Durst's younger brother. Douglas Durst took the stand and told jurors he fears his brother and even hired protection against him. Robert Durst is on trial for the murder of his friend Susan Berman in December of 2000. The Dursts are major players in New York City real estate. Douglas Durst was chosen to run the organization over his older brother. The brothers do not get along and haven't spoken in decades. On the stand, Douglas testified Robert left the family business as part of a $60 million settlement. Douglas Durst says he took extra security precautions because he was afraid of his older brother.
Why did you hire security? What was the reason for that?
Because I have fear my brother has threatened to kill me, and I have fear that he may have the means to do so.
Despite everything that has happened, how do you feel about your brother as you sit here today?
First, I am frightened, and I also, though, feel sorry for him for the situation that we're in. I would have done anything to avoid it.
On cross-examination, defense attorney Dick DeGuerin questioned Doug about the allegations surrounding his involvement with the disappearance of Kenney Durst.
Gave every appearance of wanting to find her at the time, didn't he?
Yes.
There have been allegations through the years that accuse you or the Durst organization or Seymour or even Mr. Lewin of colluding to cover up Kathy's disappearance, right?
That allegation has been made. I can speak for my family, but not Mr. Lewin.
You're insulted by it, aren't you?
Yes.
And you know that Seymour would not have done anything to cover up Bob's complicity if he believed that Bob was complicit, don't you?
That is correct, yes.
On redirect, prosecutor John Lewin questioned Doug about how his brother felt when his wife went missing.
And your words were that he seemed distraught when he told you that Kathy was missing. Do you recall that testimony?
I do, yes.
Do you know if he was actually distraught?
He did not seem as distraught as I would have been if my wife was missing for 3 days.
And to whatever level he appeared distraught, do you know if that was genuine?
There's almost no emotion that Bob shows that is genuine.
On a break, attorneys again brought up the need to empty the bag connected to Durst's catheter. Prosecutor Lewin offered to keep helping Durst change it. Durst responds in a voice that can be hard to hear, saying, "Tell him no. It will inhibit me from making him look like a fool when he cross-examines me."
The issue of a consultation, etc., whatever consultations Mr. Durst is going to have is one thing, but obviously this is very simple. The bag just needs to be emptied. I'm more than happy to do it.
Thank you, Mr. Lewin. I'll take it from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
It will inhibit me from making him look like a fool when he cross-examines me. I don't feel badly for him.
Joining us today is correspondent Anjanette Levy and Terry Austin. Anjanette, sparks were flying and have been flying between the defense and prosecution from the very beginning. Now Durst is jumping in. What did you make about Durst's remarks to Prosecutor Lewin?
Well, I think it was classic Robert Durst. You know, he's been sitting there quietly. He's spoken out against his attorneys in the past, right before this trial began. He thought that they were suffering from dementia or something like that. He wasn't pleased with them. So he doesn't hold back. He doesn't pull any punches, and he thinks he's met his match here. And I think he seems to think he's going to make mincemeat out of John Lewin. He has a story to tell, and he wants to tell it.
I mean, I can't wait to see that. Thank goodness Law&Crime's got cameras in there because it's going to be exciting.
Me too.
When he takes the stand. Terry, even his younger brother was afraid of him. Does this fact put Durst right where Lewin wants him, as someone capable of murder?
Absolutely, no question about it. I have never seen a case where the brothers, the siblings of the individual, of the defendant, is afraid of him. They know for a fact that Kathy Durst has disappeared. They know for a fact that Morris Black is gone, and Durst admitted to chopping him up. And they also know that Susan Berman was shot dead. And he himself, the defendant, has threatened both of the brothers. So it's understandable that they are afraid of him. And it does put Durst right where the prosecution wants him. He's definitely capable of murder.
Absolutely. If your own brother is afraid of you, what would others say as well? I think John Lewin is doing a great job of painting the picture as to who Robert Durst is for the defense, and to maybe bring up reasonable doubt. I'm not sure just yet, but the jury's going to have a lot to digest here. Thank you both. Still ahead on Law and Crime Daily, the Capitol Gazette shooter back in court after his guilty plea. But first, the trial of a father after his 13-year-old son was found murdered in Colorado. More heartbreaking testimony about the death of Dylan Redwine next. Welcome back. Dylan Redwine's stepfather takes the stand along with the fire chief who helped search for the missing boy. Law and Crime's Anjanette Levy is back with what both of them told the jury. Anjanette?
Yeah, Brian, Dylan Redwine's stepfather talked about what he and Dylan's mother did to try to aid in the searches for Dylan. And he also told the jury about who he saw near the road where Dylan's remains were eventually found.
Michael Hall testified that Dylan only visited his father a couple of times after the fire at Mark Redwine's home in 2010.
Did Dylan ever come back from Mark Redwine's house on those trips with any bleeding injury of any kind?
No.
Hall also testified Dylan would often not respond to his father's texts.
Mark would try to get a hold of Dylan with no success. Then Mark would then start texting Elaine.
Hall recalled how he and Dylan's mother helped with the searches for Dylan. Months after Dylan went missing, Hall said he saw Mark Redwine in an area that would later become significant.
I saw Mark Redwine coming down Middle Mountain Road in a white Dodge Dakota truck.
2 months later, part of Dylan's remains were found on Middle Mountain Road. Mark Redwine's attorney suggested investigators didn't try to involve his client in the search.
Do you know if law enforcement also contacted Mr. Redwine to identify items?
I do not.
Laid back, nonchalant.
Was there any emotion?
No, sir.
Retired Deputy Fire Chief Roy Vreeland describing Mark Redwine's demeanor as he searched for Dylan. Vreeland used a dog to track Dylan's scent, but came up with nothing. He was set up outside of Mark Redwine's home.
Did you ever see him come out of the house at all to check in?
I did not.
Now, Roy Vreeland suggested that Mark Redwine suggested to Roy Vreeland, rather, that Dylan may have gone fishing at a lake that was about 9 miles away. So they started focusing the search efforts on that area. And when asked, Vreeland said that Mark Redwine told him that Dylan would have likely walked to that lake. Brian?
Interesting, Anjanette. Let's bring back co-host Terry Austin. Terry, Michael Hall's testimony is really starting to fill in the blanks for the prosecution. Was there one thing about that testimony that made you think, oh, Redwine's guilty?
Well, there were several things, Brian, that stood out to me. First of all, there's no question that the stepfather has a much closer relationship, both to Dylan and Corey, compared to their father. And so I think that shows that there was a problem as far as the defendant's personality was concerned. And it also stood out to me that the stepfather, Michael, was very involved in all of the searches. And what really impressed me, Brian, is the fact that he hired a team with sonar to search that lake. And to me, that means you're going above and beyond and that you really care about finding Dylan. And it shows just the opposite in contrast as far as the defendant was concerned. He didn't get himself involved in most of the searches. But the thing that really stood out, Brian, was the fact that Michael Hall saw Mark Redwine's truck in the area where eventually Dylan's remains were found. And so there's something about that. What was he doing? He ran away when he actually saw Michael Hall's car as well. So I think that's very suspicious.
Yeah, very powerful point for the prosecution. And Jeanette, how is the defense trying to explain Mark Redwine not participating in searches for Dylan?
You know, they've suggested that, you know, the whole community was turning on Mark Redwine, that even Elaine Hall had been to a rally in front of Mark Redwine's home, that everybody was looking at him as public enemy number one. So, of course, why would he come out and join these people when they're all, you know, suspecting him of being involved in Dylan's disappearance? But, you know, he was the responsible parent at the time. Dylan was in his care, in his custody, so you would expect him to maybe be a little bit concerned if his son disappears on his watch. And it doesn't sound like to a lot of people that he was.
Absolutely. Now, Terry, do you think that Michael Hall's testimony is going to be the nail in the coffin for this case, or is there still some reasonable doubt left for the defense to work with?
I think there is still some reasonable doubt, but Michael Hall's testimony absolutely helped the prosecution. I think that the jury is looking at him, and the jury likes him and believes him, and so it's going to help at the end of the day as far as building the entire case.
Absolutely. Thank you both. Coming up on Law and Crime Daily, Imran Bundy faces a jury in Idaho a week after announcing his run for governor. Plus, police officers jumping into action. The harrowing rescue of an elderly woman trapped in her vehicle as floodwaters continue to rise. The video you don't want to miss, next. Welcome back. The Capital Gazette shooter is back in court as a jury will now decide if he was legally sane at the time of the mass shooting. Jared Ramos pled guilty to 23 charges stemming from the June 28, 2018 shooting that left 5 people dead inside the newspaper's building. Defense attorneys say Ramos was insane for years before the attack and remains so to this day. Since the burden of proof for the phase lies in the defense, they are calling witnesses to present evidence first. Prosecutors are reserving their opening statements for after the defense's case. Investigators believe Ramos was out for revenge and spent years planning the attack carried out 3 years ago. And in Idaho, the trial is underway for the controversial anti-government activist Imran Bundy. Bundy was arrested twice at the Idaho State Capitol in August 2020 after leading a group of maskless protesters against the state's stay-at-home order. He's facing a charge of criminal trespass for actively disturbing legislative hearings and refusing to leave the State House. Earlier this month, Bundy announced his bid for governor of Idaho. In 2016, Bundy led an armed standoff against federal agents in Oregon. He was later acquitted. The man accused of killing a Tennessee deputy could face the possibility of the death penalty if convicted, a judge has ruled. Steve Wiggins is charged with the 2018 murder of Sergeant Daniel Baker. Investigators say Wiggins shot Baker 6 times before setting his patrol car on fire. Wiggins is also accused of using Baker's radio to talk to other deputies pretending to be Baker. Attorneys for Wiggins accuse the state of showing a bias towards Baker's family and colleagues. Wiggins is set to stand trial next month. At the time of his death, Baker was the lead investigator on the baby Joe Daniels case. The missing 5-year-old's father was convicted earlier this month. And in Michigan, police officers rescued an 82-year-old woman trapped in her vehicle as rising floodwaters swept it away. Dashcam video shows 2 officers in Clinton Township entering into the murky water. The woman's vehicle was almost fully submerged and still sinking as the water continued to rise. A 3rd officer rushes in and swims towards the vehicle. After just seconds, the officers emerged with the woman carrying her to safety. She was conscious and alert, but taken to a hospital for observation. The woman later told local media she had been driving in what she believed to be a simple puddle when her car was picked up and swept away. She said she was swallowing water when the police got there. It was like I had arms of God around me, the woman said, describing the officers who saved her life. All right, let's bring in co-host Terry Austin and correspondent Anjanette Levy to get the reactions to the rescue. First, Terry, what did you think about this?
Brian, I thought this was an amazing rescue. Not only were these police officers in the right place at the right time, but they thought quickly. They took everything off, jumped right in the water, and thank goodness they did what they needed to do. They are true heroes.
Anjanette, in your response to this, as we said, a harrowing response to by these officers.
Yeah, I'm just glad that they were able to get to her. That is one of the most terrifying things I think that somebody could endure is drowning like that. And we've seen stories about this in the past, you know, reenactments of people trying to get out of vehicles, and it's very difficult. So I'm just glad that she was rescued and that they got there just in time.
Yeah. And of course, like the local authorities say, be careful of driving over water. Even 6 inches of water can be deceiving and sweep your car away. And of course, there are plenty of safety measures that you can take as to how to get out of a vehicle in an emergency. Thank you both, Anjanette and Terry. When we come back, 4 of his 6 wives are dead. But could Thomas Randolph be off the hook for all of their cases? Hear from the so-called Black Widower next. Welcome back. The so-called Nevada widower has strong words for the judge presiding over his case. He was granted a new trial, but now says he can't properly prepare with his attorneys. Thomas Randolph was convicted and sentenced to death for hiring a hitman to murder one of his 6 wives in Las Vegas. Prosecutors say Randolph then shot the hitman and called 911 to stage the incident. Randolph has been dubbed the Black Widower. 4 of his 6 wives are dead. His conviction and sentence was tossed out last year because at trial, prosecutors mentioned the 1986 death of Randolph's wife. He was tried and acquitted in that case. Now, Randolph is getting ready to stand trial again next year, but he says he can't meet with his attorneys in prison to review evidence and is telling judge she better do something about it.
This is nonsense. I want the hell out of here. And I know when these lawyers see what there is to see, they're going to file the appropriate motions, and they're going to ruin your day, and they're going to ruin the state's day, because then you are going to grant these motions that they file, and I'm going home. It's that simple. But it's not going to happen until they come and see me, till they have access to me. I've been waiting 14 years. I've had 25 attorneys. It's getting old. So you have to step up and make these people do what they need to do.
Well, the judge didn't exactly appreciate Randolph telling her how to run her court.
You can't dictate when the lawyers are going to come visit you, okay? These lawyers are going to come visit you when they can arrange to come out and visit you. I am not going to sit here and guarantee you that that's going to happen on July 10th, because then if it doesn't happen, then we lie. Mr. Randolph, when I'm talking, you're not. I'm not going to guarantee you that. We're also not having a status check date on July 16th. I'm going to set a status check date momentarily, but I'm about to hear from Mr. Orm because he would like to be heard. Go ahead, Mr. Orm.
Your Honor, just so the record is clear, I'm confirming today. I know Mr. Randolph has serious issues, and I'm going to work with Mr. Randolph and Mr. Ornos. I'm confirming today. I know very limited information about the case, but we're going to make sure that Mr. Randolph is visited, his issues are taken care of, the appropriate motions are filed. And so I want to assure the court and Mr. Randolph of that.
And Randolph had one more thing to tell the judge, that he's filed his own motion and that he wants her and his attorneys to read.
I filed a motion, and I don't think you've got it yet. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Basically, what this motion is, and I'm filing.
Randolph, you're not going to tell me what the motion is. When I get the motion, it's going to be calendar. You're not going to tell me what the motion is today, because the motion is not on calendar, and I'm not going to decide it because I haven't read it. When the motion gets filed, I'm going to read it, and then I will decide it at that time.
Okay. That's what I had asked, if we could do that on the 30th. So I guess you'll decide that and let us know.
Yep.
Now, this is an interesting development that is so unique to the pandemic. Usually, when the pandemic was not going on and your client was standing next to you and making these demands, you can kind of turn to the side and be like, shh, no, don't worry about it. But this brings in a whole new cultural background. And Jeanette, I'm sure you've seen clients speak to judges like this before. How do you think this is going to play out for Randolph after this appearance?
You know, I don't know. I thought the judge showed a lot of restraint because I've seen a lot of judges who would not have put up with that for 1 second. So Thomas Randolph obviously thinks that he is going to be acquitted, and he thinks he's running this show, and he is not running the show, and the judge let him know that. So it'll be interesting to see how he acts in the future during other court appearances.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in his mind, this is the Thomas Randolph show, and we're all just extras in it. But to that point, Terry, but for the prosecutor mentioning a previous case, Randolph may have been convicted. So what do you think Randolph wants to show that proves his innocence? Or do you think it's a whole lot of nothing?
It is a whole lot of nothing here. He is absolutely bluffing. The evidence is really stacked against him, Brian. I mean, yes, his trial was overturned. He did get a break there as far as that's concerned. But there was so much evidence against him, not the least of which was the fact that there were 218 phone calls with Miller. Miller is the one he hired to kill his wife, Sharon. So there's no question that he killed his wife. He killed the person he hired to kill her, so there would be no evidence. And, you know, I think that's going to come out again, regardless of what they talk about in terms of the other 4 out of 6 wives that are no longer with us.
Hey, it's still going to be interesting. I can't wait to see how this plays out. He's at least confident that something's going to prove his innocence. We'll see how that plays out when the trial begins. And Jeanette, Terry, thank you for joining us. And thank you for joining us here on Law and Crime Daily. We'll see you next time as we discuss justice in America.